The world's largest democracy is competing for space at the global altar of power. We will talk to India's External Affairs Minister about the country's geopolitical ambitions and challenges. Next on the line. This is On the Line, and I'm Aisha Tanzeen. India continues its struggle to be a major global player with ambitions to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Earlier, we sat down with India's External Affairs Minister Salman Khurshid to talk about India's relationships in its own region and around the world. Let's watch. Mr. Salman Khurshid, thank you so much for joining us. Let me start by asking you, what role do you see India playing on a global stage in the coming years?
We are trying to put together for the globe an interesting destination, whether it's for tourism or investment, for cooperation in fields of human endeavor that are of critical nature, where the world scenario of World Trade Organization, climate change, strategic security issues, counterterrorism, nuclear proliferation. These are vast areas of concern in the world. And India has a contribution, and we have consciously worked to be in a position and have built capacity to address these issues in a cooperative manner, in a collaborative manner. We do think that this is both in terms of our commitment, in terms of our capacity, ability, in terms of our markets, in terms of our population, and in terms of our economic growth, something that we offer to the world in spirit of partnership. And now it's for the world and the globe to make up its mind what role it wants India to perform.
What exactly is India's relationship with the U.S.? Is India the counterbalance to China in the region that the U.S. seeks?
Well, see, the U.S. may have its own view of the world and perception of the world. We have our own indeed. We are happy to work for the Asian century along with China. China is our neighbor and in many ways a competitor. But China is also a country that we work closely with in terms of many multilateral issues. China is also a country that we have worked very assiduously and consciously to develop a firm, good, sustainable relationship with. And I believe that this is a mutual position that China and India take. We have historical issues that are still unresolved, but both of us have learned to bypass those issues, contain them, and to restrict them. And then move forward with what can be a very, very critical cooperative relationship. And we've not complained when US has tried to work closely with China. We've not complained. And I don't think that we really expect that US or China would complain about our relationships with either of them. I think we have our relationships which are based on merit and value, based on common cultural and political, ideological positions, and also in other places on what is of strategic value to us mutually with China and with the United States of America.
Well, I'll come to China later, but let me stick to America for a little bit more. Some people in Washington feel that the momentum in U.S.-India relationship gained by the nuclear deal has stalled. Why do you think is that?
Because U.S. has been looking up at or looking down from the fiscal cliff, preoccupied with major economic issues within the United States of America. Sometimes the tragic issues that they have faced, both in terms of the onslaught of weather, as indeed the onslaught of unwholesome forces, as we saw in the Boston bombings recently. And we understand that there are important domestic concerns for the US administration and US legislators, and indeed for the US business. But at the same time, there is a lot of potential both for resolving domestic issues as well as continuing a pace as far as international the platform is concerned in terms of engagement with India. And that's continued. And I believe that the appointment of the new Secretary of State and then his getting into a strategic dialogue with India over the next few weeks will bring back the sense of vitality that existed for a long time when we were on a high and then we got to a plateau and then we can go on a high again.
Well, you mentioned that China is a competitor. Let me ask you this. India and China used to be mentioned in the same breath, and now a lot of people are saying that India seems to be playing catching up. So why do you think that's happening?
Well, it depends really. It depends on what kind of glasses you wear to look at the picture in front of you. If you look at sustainable relationships, historical contacts, if you look at shared values of democracy, of rule of law, of a lot of people, opinion makers, speaking fluent English and perhaps more effective expression in English than many other countries that have been associated with the language for a long time, then you would choose India. But you put on glasses and you're looking for large sums of money that can be given on easy terms, funds that can be raised for institutions and banks, etc. It's possible that today China stands in a better position. So I think it's the kind of glasses with which you want to see the marketplace that will make a difference. And people who wear what I call the Indian color glasses see India looming much larger in terms of their idea of life. Some people who wear Chinese glasses obviously see China as being much larger and looming larger than India. But this doesn't concern and bother us. We are concerned about what we really are, not how people see us. And what we really are will ultimately prevail with how people see us. So we need to work on what we really are, and that's what we are doing.
Well, there have been recently incursions or alleged incursions, because China denies that, along the border in Ladakh. I want to ask you how India is responding to that, and does it have the potential to develop into a wider conflict, you think?
I certainly hope not. And I think that both countries have invested enormous amount of effort and time, and we've been preoccupied with building a relationship that can bypass historical hiccups and historical misgivings, and also some contentious issues, and work together on convergence in terms of economics, in terms of multilateral cooperation. And I think that neither China nor India would want one incident which by its own nature can be insignificant, but because of the context becomes extremely significant, and certainly in terms of public perception, fanned by a lot of intense media interest, it could get blown out of proportion. We would do our best not to allow that to happen. I think the relationship between India and China is too valuable. The potential is too great to be, to be sabotaged and to be sidetracked by something of this nature.
Now, India's relationship with Pakistan has always been very interesting, and as you know, there are elections going on in Pakistan. How closely is India watching these elections? And do you see less of an anti-India rhetoric this time, or is it more of the same?
I think fortunately what some people predicted is not happening. The Pakistani election at present seems more sort of concentrated on issues within Pakistan and a widespread concern in Pakistan about its future, because there have been some very difficult times for Pakistan. We are glad that despite those very difficult times, institutional conflicts and clashes, a great deal of unrest, civil strife in places, and also unwholesome attacks by terrorists, etc. Pakistan's democracy, or at least the democratically elected government, survived. They completed 5 years, and this is the first time that that's happened. And therefore, we think that this is a positive development. We hope that the election brings about a peaceful transition to a new government, and that new government again will succeed in completing 5 years of its term in terms of their constitution, and that they will be able to sideline unwholesome features that have become all too prominent in recent months, and certainly address some of the issues that we very strongly feel about. So we watch the elections closely with deep interest, but that's the best that we can do. I think it's too early to be able to predict what will happen in Pakistan, possibly an alliance of some sort, but really I think it's too early to bet on any possible outcome. There are many imponderables that continue to emerge from day to day, week to week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and we will wait and watch.
Mr. Khurshid, a few months ago when the incidents of beheading happened across LOC and temperatures were high on both sides, it seemed that temperatures cooled down pretty quickly. Do you think there's a concerted effort from both sides to keep the relationship on track?
Well, I think it was important to keep the relationship on track. It was inevitable that it would slow down. It was inevitable that we had to hold back many of the things that could have been possible. And certainly not all of that was done on the directive of government. It's also people's involvement, organizations, institutions. Many people felt that the atmosphere was not as wholesome as it should have been. So whether it was cricket, hockey, or it was cultural affairs, a lot of those things did slow down considerably. And some rapid advances we could have made as confidence-building measures on travel and transit, visas, etc., I think may well also have slowed down. But I don't think that we were derailed, fortunately. There was some sense that we could be derailed. I think that was prevented. We did our best that it should not cause a permanent damage and permanent derailment, but a slowdown was inevitable, and I think that did happen. And sometimes slowing down itself addresses the temperature issues. If your car engine is heating up and you slow down, the temperatures do come down, and then you can proceed again, fix it, put in the coolant that you need, and then you proceed again. So I think it's fortunate. It's fortunate that a very ugly situation in which too many intense public opinions were being broadcast and telecast began to cool down and has cooled down. Of course, the hurt remains, the concern remains, and we would obviously, in any conversation, want to get some response and some reply to an event about an event that caused a tremendous amount of despair in our country.
Mr. Khurshid, in the Indian military doctrine today, what is the biggest threat to India? Do you consider China or Pakistan as the biggest threat?
No, I think the biggest threat is terrorism, and terrorism comes both from outside as well as from misguided and I suppose influenced internal forces. But any form of terrorism coming from anywhere is the biggest threat, really, to us. And terrorism, as you know, can come in many different forms, and you have to be alert all the time. And I need hardly say this to someone in the United States of America of how alert you have to be. And I must say, and I must place on record the great appreciation that many people have for the manner in which and the alacrity and the effectiveness with which your police forces reacted to catch and to bring to book people who were responsible for an attack on innocent people in your country in recent days. So that's our biggest threat. Now, somebody, nation state encouraging this behavior against the Indian state is obviously unacceptable, and we hope that this will not be done by anyone. Coming to China, I think we have learned to live together, and that's the good news for the world. And our Prime Minister has gone on record to say the world is large enough to find enough space for India and for China. Therefore, really, there is no reason why we should get into a conflict or a confrontation. And we moved away from that scenario for many, many years, and that's the good news for us and for the world. But, obviously, India, both in terms of its stature, position, the assets that it has to protect, not here but the world over, etc., needs military capacity and military machine that can act quickly and respond quickly. But a pacifist nation, a nation does not believe in attacking anyone. We haven't attacked any country ever during our independent days. We have even sent troops when we've been asked to send troops, largely to the United Nations for peacekeeping, and briefly when we were requested by governments of our neighboring countries to help them when they were in distress. But otherwise, we don't make hostile moves against any country.
Okay, let's talk about another important country in the region, and that is Afghanistan. What do you see India's role in Afghanistan post-2014?
Whatever Afghanistan's role is, will be India's role. We are committed to Afghanistan as a friend. We are willing to advise. We are willing to share our thoughts. We are willing to put red flags that the world shares and which Afghanistan shares, the red lines, etc., and emphasize them and remind Afghanistan from time to time. But we are not going to reorder Afghan society. We are not going to work for Afghanistan to move only in a particular direction that is predetermined by us. We consider them friends, partners, and we would like to engage them in that manner.
Are you concerned with the role the U.S. and the Afghan government has now given to the Pakistanis in the current peace plan? They've almost been given the driving seat, and some say India has been sidelined.
Well, I don't know. We think whatever Afghanistan finds good and comfortable with, they are comfortable with, we go along. But as I said, we certainly engage with them, discuss with them, try to give what our understanding is of the entire problem. We don't want to be part of any problem for Afghanistan. We want to be part of the solution. But we do know that some of the directions that have been taken in recent months may not necessarily be in the long run of great comfort to Afghanistan.
What direction would you like Afghanistan to take?
For their people to decide freely what they want to do. They must, as a sovereign country, be able to decide their own future. And friends and stakeholders should be willing to help them on their terms rather than dictate terms to them.
Mr. Khurshid, India used to be a champion of the Palestinian cause, and in recent years, India's relationship with Israel has really grown, especially the military relationship. How would that impact India's position on the Palestinian issue and India's relationship with the rest of the Arab world?
Well, India has a unique position of being able to remain friends with opposing sides. This is not just in the matter of Palestine and Israel. It is also in many other parts. In the East, for instance, China and Japan, we're friends of both of them. If you talk on a global scale between the United States of America and Iran, India has good relations with both sides, and transparent, open, candid, and fair. But what is important, what is very important is that people should not insist that we do our friendship with one at the cost of the other. We're not prepared to do that. We are also willing to tell our friends where we think that they need to hold back, as we did with Iran. And sometimes there's a disappointment, but fortunately there is no breakdown.
You said you can have good relationships with both, but recently India reduced its oil imports from Iran under pressure from US, and some are even saying this is against India's non-alignment policies.
No, we didn't. We didn't reduce our intake, our purchases from Iran because of any sanctions and our acceptance of sanctions unilaterally imposed by the United States. But we were party. We were party to the decision taken by the Security Council, by the UN, and to that extent, we had to comply with the UN sanctions. The reduction has happened naturally because there is problem of banking, there's a problem of shipping and insurance, and for that reason there has been a difficulty in paying for supplies from Iran, and therefore there has been a reduction in purchases. But you know, Iran is a major supplier of fuel to India, and India therefore, as a friend, cannot give up those supplies. But if it's impossible because of sanctions imposed by the US on many other people who accept those sanctions, then of course it will affect India's purchases from Iran. But that's just a fact of life. We have to find reasonable ways and suitable ways in which the extent to which we have to rely on purchases from them can be sustained and preserved. It was done through an Italian bank, through a Turkish bank for a while. Now that also seems to be the Halk Bank procedure, and the routes seems to be closing down. So we will see what else we can do and how we can manage. Can it be done through a barter? Can it be done through any other process or procedure? But most of all, we hope really and sincerely would want to see a breakthrough in the nuclear talks between Iran and P5+1, and hope that the sanctions will be eased, not only for the welfare of India, but also ultimately for the welfare of the Iranian people.
Mr. Salman Khurshid, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We were watching India's Minister for External Affairs, Salman Khurshid. Thank you for joining us. Please send us your questions or comments, or watch our past shows on our website, voanews.com/ontheline. We look forward to hearing from you and hope you'll join us again next week for On the Line.
Two little girls are taking big steps to change the world, one test tube at a time. Next on Discoveries and Breakthroughs.
Come on, Mio, get in the mix.
Claire Dworsky is a typical 9-year-old, but what she found out on the soccer field is making history.
I like testing things and finding out the truth.
Claire was the youngest scientist presenting her research at the American Geophysical Union meeting. She scored an invite after a startling discovery in her hometown soccer field.
When I look down, the ground is murky, so I wanted to test it out with science, and I went on to Kids Science Challenge.
Claire was curious about the difference in the quality of water running through turf versus natural grass. With the help of earth scientist and oceanographer Adina Payton, Claire launched the largest study of its kind. She found the chemicals in the runoff water of both fields sometimes exceeded recommended levels set by the Environmental Protection Agency.
Mostly, I was most impressed by the fact that the project stemmed from her own observation, from her own encounter with the surroundings.
You shouldn't put the grass or the turf near water, because it can cause eutrophication, which is when it causes a dead zone, and it can kill aquatic life.
Another standout, 4th grader Olivia Smith Donovan.
My mom made me keep a journal of any ideas I had.
Such an idea landed Olivia first place at the 2010 Kids Science Challenge for bio-inspired design. She's helping to create a model big enough to be used to drop emergency packages from great heights. She was inspired by maple tree seeds, which twirl around as they fall to the ground. She teamed up with engineers at the University of Maryland to create a prototype.
Well, we had no idea if a paper tree was actually going to stick with the original plans and spin. But we were all kind of surprised that it actually worked. And then the biodegradable one.
Olivia and Claire, just two of the young, great minds shaping the world today. One idea, one challenge, many possibilities. For Claire's mom, it's just that simple.
Take a couple minutes and dinner will wait. You know, it's important to indulge their curiosity.
I'm Alex Kane reporting.
Photographer Colin Legg specializes in landscape astrophotography. You'll know it when you see it.
I'm interested in finding vistas which get me off the planet, vistas of untouched landscapes at night.
And by day,
I'm a geologist, but I work in a data management company for geological data.
Legg's photography takes him to remote places in Australia, where he lives, and around the world. And just consider for a moment what might be required to capture this time-lapsed starry night.
It's for IMAX, so this sequence needed to be at much higher resolution than just your typical DSLR.
Legg uses a Canon 5D Mark II, for you shutterflies out there. But one camera wouldn't give him enough pixels for that supersized IMAX screen.
We have multiple cameras operating together and then stitch those images into a seamless image.
That means every 30 seconds, those 5 cameras snapped in synchrony.
The added complication then was that I had to actually track the light through the day and the night
to get the correct exposure.
And I had to do that out in the middle of Western Australia on a lake bed because we didn't want any obstacles on the horizon.
And Legg didn't want any light pollution either, so no nearby infrastructure.
And so I had the cameras all running off of solar panels.
And here's the real kicker to me. It wasn't just a day.
Originally it was for 12 days, but I only got to 11.
Every sequence seems to have a story like this. Take this eclipse video from northern Queensland.
I had to hike about 850 metres on just virgin bush with about 40 kilograms of gear. And I had to sleep on a rock ledge about 100 metres from the top. And then I had to do that last 100 metres just after the start of twilight.
And then there's the challenge of getting the right exposure.
That light changed by about 4 stops.
Legg uses software that allows him to pre-program the exposures for each shot during the eclipse.
So the script is just a little ASCII file and it has a line per exposure. Then you connect your laptop to the camera via USB cable.
And then it's hands-free photography.
For the total eclipse, I made a pledge with myself not to worry about the cameras. That event, like your brain pretty much just melts and you can't do anything but just sit back with your mouth wide open.
And Legg's photography may provoke the same reaction. The time-lapse process, which condenses 3.5 hours of real time into about 15 seconds of footage, brings the night sky to life. Plus,
with our eyes, we're looking at a very short window of time, whereas a camera can actually sit there and expose for 30 seconds. So it just sucks in that much more light.
Leaving the shutter open for 30 seconds allows the camera to pick up faint colors that would be invisible to our eyes.
Even in latitudes that can't see the aurora, you still get a lot of interesting ionization in the upper atmosphere and ionosphere, which give off light. And you can get some really interesting patterns of green and yellow and red, which change throughout the night.
You can see those green and red bands in the middle of this frame.
It's only really, I guess, with the cameras being so sensitive now that we're able to pick it up.
This sensitivity can also play tricks on our diurnally predisposed minds. For instance, I mistook this for sunrise.
That's actually sunset, and you're actually seeing the camera become more sensitive through the sequence, and it finishes up actually in a moonlit night.
I guess the stars kind of give it away. And then there's this. That's a moonset. Each image that makes up a nighttime sequence like this requires a 20 to 30 second exposure, Legg says.